My name is Celeste Marion. I'm 29 years old, and until 3 days ago, I owned the most beautiful coastal estate in Monterey Bay. Built from nothing but sweat, tears, and a dream I refused to let die, that $6 million property was my life's work. Every sunrise I watched from those floor-to-ceiling windows, every storm I weathered on that wraparound deck, every guest who gasped at the infinity pool that seemed to melt into the Pacific Ocean itself. I built it all. Me. Not my husband Thaddeus, not his family's old money connections, not the trust fund he pretended didn't exist. Just a girl from a trailer park in Bakersfield who clawed her way up through real estate deals, renovation projects, and 16-hour workdays. But 3 days ago, I signed it all away. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to discover what happened next. Sign or get out, Thaddeus had smirked, standing in MY foyer with papers spread across MY marble countertop. His perfectly pressed suit, his slicked back hair, that condescending smile that made my stomach turn to ice. Choose wisely, Celeste. This is your last chance to walk away with dignity. The black ink felt heavy in my hand as I signed my name on every page. I could hear the ocean through the open windows, calling to me one last time. When I finished, I placed the keys down gently, looked him straight in the eye, and smiled. That smile should have warned him. I walked out of that house carrying nothing but my purse and a secret that would destroy him. 24 hours later, his phone started ringing. His lawyers, his accountant, his precious mother who controlled his trust fund, they were all screaming the same thing. Do you have any idea what your wife just did to you? But you want to know what that secret was, don't you? What I knew that Thaddeus didn't. What made a woman walk away from $6 million with a smile on her face? Well, let me tell you about the day I discovered my husband's biggest weakness and how I turned it into his complete and utter destruction. Let me take you back to where it all began, 6 years ago in the dusty heat of Fresno. I was 23, working as a junior real estate agent, driving a beat-up Honda with duct tape holding the passenger seat together. That's when I first saw Thaddeus Kensington at the Riverside Country Club, standing like a golden statue against the emerald fairway. He was everything I wasn't. Trust fund baby, Yale education, shoes that cost more than my monthly rent. His mother, Cordelia Kensington, ruled the social scene like a queen surveying her kingdom. Old California money, the kind that whispered rather than shouted, that crushed dreams with silk gloves instead of iron fists. You're not like the others, he told me that first night, his breath smelling of expensive whiskey and promises. You have hunger. I admire that. What I didn't know then was that Thaddeus collected hungry people like trophies. He fed off ambition the way vampires feed off blood, and I was a feast he couldn't resist. The courtship felt like a fairy tale written in golden ink. Private jets to Napa Valley, surprise deliveries of white orchids that filled my cramped apartment with their funeral suite fragrance, weekend getaways to his family's vineyard in Sonoma where the air tasted of possibility and wine. But even then, there were cracks in the marble facade. The way his jaw tightened when I mentioned expanding my real estate business. How his eyes went cold as winter glass when I talked about buying my first investment property. The subtle way he steered conversations away from my dreams and toward his vision of our future. You won't need to work once we're married, he said one evening, twirling pasta around his fork with surgical precision. The Kensington women focus on family, charity work, maintaining our legacy. I should have run. Should have seen the golden cage being constructed around me, one beautiful bar at a time. But I was young and hungry and so desperately tired of being broke. The wedding was everything I'd never dared to dream of. 500 guests, a cathedral of white roses, my dress cascading like spilled moonlight down the aisle of the most exclusive venue in Carmel. But as I walked toward Thaddeus, I caught sight of his mother's face in the front row, her smile sharp as a surgical blade. That night, alone in our honeymoon suite while he slept beside me, I stared out at the Pacific Ocean and made myself a promise. I would build something that could never be taken from me. Something that was mine alone. I had no idea that promise would become both my salvation and the weapon I'd use to destroy the man sleeping peacefully beside me, dreaming of a wife who no longer existed. The morning after our honeymoon, I woke up to find Thaddeus had already left for his office at Kensington Holdings, leaving behind only the lingering scent of his cologne and a credit card with a sticky note for household expenses. Keep receipts. Household expenses. As if I were a housekeeper in my own marriage. That afternoon, I did something that would change everything. Instead of shopping for throw pillows and matching dinnerware like a good Kensington wife, I drove to the seediest part of Salinas and bought a foreclosed duplex for $12,000 cash. Money I'd saved from my real estate commissions, hidden in a separate account Thaddeus didn't know existed. The duplex was a monument to neglect. Peeling paint hung like dead skin from the walls, the floors warped with water damage, and the smell of mildew clung to everything like a desperate ghost. But I saw past the decay to the bones underneath, strong and waiting for resurrection. I spent my days playing the perfect wife, attending Cordelia's charity luncheons where women with diamond tennis bracelets discussed their manicurists like foreign policy. I smiled at their jokes, complimented their handbags, and listened to their complaints about housekeepers and personal shoppers with the patience of a saint. But my nights belonged to me. Under cover of darkness, I transformed that duplex with my own hands. I learned to replace drywall from YouTube videos, taught myself plumbing from library books, and discovered I had a gift for seeing potential where others saw only problems. Each night, I came home with dirt under my fingernails and satisfaction in my soul, showering away the evidence before Thaddeus returned from whatever meeting or dinner kept him occupied. 6 months later, I sold that duplex for $45,000. The buyers were a young couple with a baby, and watching them sign the papers felt like witnessing a birth. I had created something beautiful from nothing, something that would shelter dreams and nurture hopes. Thaddeus never knew. He was too busy building his own empire, expanding Kensington Holdings with the ruthless efficiency of a man born to win. He traveled constantly, sealed deals in boardrooms that smelled of leather and ambition, and came home expecting a wife who would massage his shoulders and listen to his victories without offering opinions of her own. I gave him exactly what he wanted. The perfect wife, elegant as a swan, supportive as a prayer, quiet as a grave. But while he slept, I was becoming something else entirely. Property by property, deal by deal, I built my own kingdom in the shadows of his empire. Rental houses in Modesto, commercial buildings in Stockton, a small apartment complex in Merced. Each purchase funded by the profits from the last, each success hidden behind shell companies and carefully managed paperwork. By our 3rd anniversary, I owned 17 properties worth over $2 million. Thaddeus toasted our marriage with champagne that cost more than most people's monthly salary, never suspecting that his quiet wife had become a real estate mogul right under his nose. But success has a scent, and predators can smell it from miles away. It was only a matter of time before my secret life collided with his, and when it did, the explosion would reshape both our worlds forever. The beginning of the end came on a Tuesday morning that dawned gray as old dishwater. I was in my home office, reviewing contracts for a waterfront development in Santa Cruz when I heard Thaddeus's car pull into our driveway 3 hours earlier than expected. The sound of his footsteps on our marble foyer had an urgency that made my stomach clench like a fist. Celeste. His voice carried something new, something that made the air in our house feel suddenly thin. We need to talk. I closed my laptop with deliberate calm, the same way I'd learned to hide my real estate empire, and walked downstairs to find him standing in our living room like a stranger. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his tie loosened, and there was a wildness in his eyes that reminded me of a cornered animal. "I know what you've been doing," he said, and the words hit me like ice water in my veins. "The properties, the shell companies, the secret accounts. Did you really think you could hide an empire from me?" The strange thing was, I felt relief. After 3 years of living 2 lives, of being both the perfect wife and the hidden mogul, the truth felt like setting down a weight I'd carried too long. "How long have you known?" I asked, settling into the ivory leather chair that had never felt like mine despite my name on the deed. 6 months, he said, and his smile was razor wire wrapped in silk. "I hired a private investigator when I noticed you'd been getting phone calls during dinner. Contractors, tenants, property managers. My wife, the secret real estate queen. 6 months. He'd known for 6 months and said nothing, watching me like a specimen under glass while he planned whatever this was. The betrayal tasted like copper pennies on my tongue. The question is, he continued, loosening his tie completely, what are we going to do about it? That night, he showed me his true face for the first time. Not the charming prince who'd swept me off my feet, not the devoted husband who brought me flowers on Fridays. This was Thaddeus Kensington in his natural habitat, and he was magnificent in his cruelty. You built all this using my connections, he said, gesturing toward the contracts spread across our dining table. My name opened doors for you. My reputation gave you credibility. Legally speaking, I have a claim to half of everything you've built. But it was worse than that. Much worse. Because he didn't want half. He wanted it all, and he had the weapons to take it. One phone call to the right people, and your permits get revoked. One conversation with my mother's friends at the Planning Commission, and your commercial projects get tied up in red tape for years. I can destroy your little empire with the same ease I built mine. The air in our house had changed, becoming thick with the scent of his cologne mixed with something else, something that reminded me of the way hospitals smell when hope dies. For the first time in 3 years, I was seeing my husband clearly, and what I saw made my blood run cold as mountain snow. He wasn't just threatening to take my properties. He was threatening to erase me, to turn me back into the broke girl from Bakersfield who'd been so grateful for his attention. The girl who'd believed in fairy tales and happy endings. But that girl was already dead. She died the moment I signed my first deed, been buried deeper with every property I'd acquired. What stood in her place was something harder, something that had learned to smile while planning war. What do you want? I asked, my voice steady as a surgeon's hand. His smile could have cut glass. Everything. What Thaddeus didn't understand about war is that the most dangerous enemy is the one who's already lost everything once. I had been poor, truly poor, eating ramen noodles for 3 meals a day and choosing between gas money and groceries. He had never known that kind of hunger, the kind that carves hollow places in your soul where desperation grows like poison ivy. I want a divorce, I told him the next morning over coffee that tasted like bitter defeat. We can work out the property division with lawyers. His laughter was silver bells filled with acid. Oh, my dear Celeste. You still don't understand how this works, do you? That's when he showed me the photographs. Pictures of me meeting with contractors at midnight, accepting cash payments from tenants, using shell companies to hide property purchases. Nothing illegal, but presented in the right light, to the right people, it could look like money laundering, tax evasion, fraud. My family has connections you can't imagine, he said, sliding the photographs across our breakfast table like cards in a poker game. The district attorney plays golf with my father. The head of the IRS Western Division was my roommate at Yale. One phone call and your empire doesn't just crumble. It becomes evidence in a federal investigation. I stared at those photographs and felt something inside me crystallize into diamond-hard resolve. He thought he was showing me my weakness. Instead, he was teaching me exactly how much I had to lose and how far I was willing to go to protect it. What do you want? I asked again, because in war, you have to understand your enemy's objectives before you can destroy them. I want you to transfer all your properties to me. Every deed, every LLC, every secret account. In exchange, these photographs disappear, and you get to walk away with your reputation intact. His mistake was thinking I cared about reputation more than justice. That I valued my freedom more than my revenge. That the girl from Bakersfield still lived inside me, scared and small and willing to be saved. But she was gone, replaced by something that had learned to build empires in shadows and smile while planning destruction. Something that understood that sometimes the only way to win is to appear to lose completely. I need time to think, I said, and his smile was the satisfied purr of a cat with a mouse between its paws. 24 hours, he said. Then I make some phone calls. That night, while Thaddeus slept the peaceful sleep of the predator, I made my own phone calls. To lawyers he'd never heard of, in cities he'd never visited, who specialized in the kind of warfare he thought he'd invented. I learned things about asset protection, about trusts and foundations, about ways to move money that left no fingerprints. But more importantly, I learned something about my husband that he'd never suspected I knew. Something I discovered 2 months ago, but kept locked away like a loaded gun, waiting for the right moment to pull the trigger. Thaddeus Kensington, golden boy of California society, had a weakness. A secret shame that could destroy not just him, but his entire family's legacy. And unlike him, when I pulled my trigger, I wouldn't miss. The art of war isn't about strength. It's about knowing exactly where to strike so that one blow becomes 1,000 and your enemy destroys himself with his own momentum. I had 24 hours to prepare for battle. It would be enough. 2 months earlier, I had discovered Thaddeus's secret by accident. I was looking for our marriage certificate in his home office to update my insurance paperwork when I found the folder hidden behind his diplomas. A folder marked Riverside Development, confidential, in his careful handwriting. Inside were documents that made my hands shake like autumn leaves. Environmental reports showing toxic soil contamination. Safety inspections revealing structural defects. And most damning of all, emails between Thaddeus and city officials discussing expedited approvals in exchange for campaign contributions and offshore consulting fees. The Riverside development wasn't just another luxury housing project. It was 200 homes built on contaminated land, with foundations that wouldn't survive a moderate earthquake, sold to young families who trusted the Kensington name. Families with children who played in yards poisoned with chemicals, who slept in bedrooms that could collapse in the next big tremor. But the worst part wasn't the corruption or the endangerment. It was the memo at the bottom of the stack, written in Thaddeus's own hand. Acceptable risk factors. Liability can be managed through shell company dissolution if issues arise. He knew. He had always known. And he had decided that other people's lives were an acceptable price to pay for his profit margins. That night, as I photocopied every document with hands steady as a surgeon's, I understood what I was holding. Not just evidence of criminal negligence, but a nuclear weapon aimed at the heart of the Kensington Empire. One that would destroy not just Thaddeus, but his mother's social standing, his father's business legacy, and the family name that had opened doors in California for 3 generations. Now, facing his ultimatum, I knew exactly how to use it. I spent the morning of his deadline making copies of everything, storing documents in safe deposit boxes across 3 different banks, uploading files to cloud servers in countries that didn't have extradition treaties. By noon, I had created a dead man's switch that would detonate automatically if anything happened to me. When Thaddeus came home that evening, expecting my surrender, I was waiting for him in his office with the original Riverside file open on his desk. The color drained from his face like water from a broken dam. "Where did you get that?" "The better question," I said, my voice calm as still water, "is where I've hidden the copies." For the first time in our marriage, I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear, the kind that comes when a predator realizes it's become prey. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," he said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "This isn't just about me. This involves people who make problems disappear permanently." "You mean like the safety inspector who died in that convenient car accident?" I asked, flipping to another page in the file. "Or the environmental scientist who had that sudden heart attack at 35. "Yes, I found those records too." The silence in that room was thick enough to choke on. Outside, I could hear the ocean waves against the cliff below our house, eternal and patient, wearing away stone one drop at a time. I was the ocean now, and he was just another cliff in my path. "What do you want?" he asked, and hearing his own words thrown back at him was sweeter than wine. "I want you to sign over the coastal estate to me," I said. "All of it. The house, the land, every improvement and furnishing. In exchange, the Riverside documents stay buried." "That property is worth $6 million, he whispered. "And how much are 200 families worth?" I asked. "How much is your freedom worth? Your family's reputation? Your mother's position in society?" He signed the papers that night, his golden boy facade cracking like old paint in the heat. But as I watched him struggle with his pen, I knew this was just the beginning. Men like Thaddeus don't surrender. They regroup, they plan, they strike back when you least expect it. I had won the battle, but the war was just beginning. I should have known that cornering a Kensington would unleash the entire pack. 3 days after Thaddeus signed over the coastal estate, I discovered that victory could taste like ashes in your mouth when served with a side of pure terror. It started with small things. My car wouldn't start, though the mechanic found nothing wrong with it. My credit cards were mysteriously declined at restaurants where I'd eaten dozens of times. Contractors on my current projects began calling with urgent concerns about permit issues that had never existed before. But the message became crystal clear when I arrived at my beautiful coastal estate to find every window shattered, the infinity pool filled with concrete, and graffiti spray-painted across the walls in words too vile to repeat. Pinned to my front door was a single photograph, me walking alone to my car in an empty parking garage, taken just hours earlier. The message was simple: we know where you are. We can reach you anywhere. Surrender or face the consequences. That night, I called the police, knowing it was useless, but needing to document everything. The responding officer was polite but distant, taking notes with the enthusiasm of someone filling out tax forms. When I mentioned the Kensington name, his expression shifted to something between pity and fear. "Ma'am," he said, closing his notepad with finality, "maybe you should consider whether this property is worth the trouble it's causing you. Even the law belonged to them." I drove to my lawyer's office the next morning, only to find him packing boxes with the frantic energy of a man fleeing a burning building. Gerald Matheson had handled my real estate deals for 3 years, had celebrated my successes like his own. Now he couldn't meet my eyes. "I'm retiring," he said, not looking up from his boxes. "Effective immediately. You'll need to find new representation." "Gerald, what's happening?" He finally looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his weathered face: genuine fear. "Some battles can't be won, Celeste. Some enemies are too big to fight. Take whatever deal they're offering and disappear." I spent that afternoon sitting in my ruined house, surrounded by shattered glass and the smell of fresh concrete. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly before me, indifferent to human suffering, beautiful in its eternal patience. I understood now why Thaddeus had been so confident, so smug. The Kensingtons didn't just have money. They had power, the kind that flows through generations like poison in a bloodstream, corrupting everything it touches. But sitting in that destruction, I realized something that should have terrified me. I wasn't afraid anymore. The girl from Bakersfield had spent her life running from poverty, from shame, from the powerlessness that comes with having nothing to lose. But I wasn't her anymore. I was something the Kensingtons had never encountered before, someone with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. They had made one critical mistake. They thought destroying my house would break my spirit. Instead, they had awakened something in me that was older than their money, deeper than their power. They had awakened the fury of a woman who had built something beautiful only to watch entitled children smash it for sport. That evening, I made a phone call that would change everything. Not to a lawyer or a private investigator, but to someone I'd hoped never to contact again. Someone from my old life in Bakersfield, someone who understood that sometimes justice comes from the shadows rather than the courtroom. "Zara," I said when she answered. "It's Celeste. I need to call in that favor you owe me." The silence on the other end stretched like a held breath. Then, "Jesus, Celeste. I was wondering when you'd remember you had friends in low places. What do you need?" "I need to disappear," I said. "And I need to take some very powerful people down with me." Her laughter was sharp as broken glass. "Now that sounds like the girl I remember. Welcome back to the real world, princess." Zara Mendez had been my college roommate back when I was still pretending I could climb out of poverty through scholarships and good grades. While I studied business law and real estate finance, she learned different skills: how to hack banking systems, how to disappear from digital surveillance, how to hurt powerful people in ways that left no fingerprints. She'd offered to teach me once, during our senior year when a professor had tried to trade grades for favors. I'd chosen to handle it through official channels, filing reports and following procedures that led nowhere while he continued his predations. Zara had handled it her way. The professor's browser history somehow ended up in the hands of his wife, the dean, and the local newspaper on the same day. "The system is rigged, Celeste," she'd told me then. "Rich people write the rules, and poor people follow them." But there's another game being played, and we can learn to play it too. Now, 5 years later, she lived in a converted warehouse in Oakland that looked abandoned from the outside, but hummed with the quiet energy of serious electronics within. Zara herself had changed, traded her college punk aesthetic for the kind of unremarkable appearance that made people's eyes slide past her without registering details. "So the golden boy and his family want to play hardball," she said, scrolling through the files I'd brought her. Her fingers moved across multiple keyboards like a pianist playing a complex symphony, screens flickering with information that moved too fast for me to follow. The Kensingtons. Old money, new corruption. I've had my eye on them for years. You know them? Honey, I know everyone who matters in this state, and most of them have done things that would make your hair curl. She pulled up what looked like a family tree, but instead of birth dates and marriages, it showed business connections, political donations, and what she called pressure points. The thing about families like this, Zara continued, highlighting connections that spread across the screen like a spider web, is they think their secrets are buried deep enough that no one will ever find them. But information wants to be free, and I'm very good at setting it loose. She showed me things that night that redefined my understanding of evil. The Riverside development was just the beginning. There were nursing homes with neglect violations covered up, environmental disasters buried under legal paperwork, and a trail of small businesses destroyed by predatory lending practices that led directly back to Kensington Holdings. But most importantly, she showed me something that made my blood freeze in my veins, a list of people who had crossed the Kensingtons and what had happened to them. Car accidents, heart attacks, disappearances that were never solved. A pattern too clear to be coincidence, too careful to be proved. "They're not just corrupt," Zara said quietly. "They're dangerous. The kind of people who see other humans as disposable resources. So, what do we do?" Her smile was the sharp edge of justice wrapped in calculation. "We give them what they've been giving everyone else for 3 generations. Consequences." The plan she outlined was elegant in its complexity. We wouldn't just expose one crime, we'd unravel the entire network. Financial records would leak to journalists, environmental reports would find their way to federal agencies, and evidence of their more violent solutions would land on the desks of prosecutors who couldn't be bought. But the key was timing. Everything had to happen simultaneously, from multiple sources, in ways that couldn't be traced back to us. A coordinated strike that would destroy their power base before they could retaliate. "This isn't just about your house," Zara warned me. "Once we start this, there's no going back. They'll come for both of us with everything they have." I thought about the families living in poisoned houses, about the small business owners who'd lost everything to Kensington greed, about all the other women who'd been discarded when they became inconvenient. I thought about my own shattered windows and the photograph pinned to my door. "Good," I said. "I'm tired of running." 3 weeks later, everything was in place. Digital dead drops, encrypted communications, journalists lined up like dominoes ready to fall. The plan would activate automatically in 72 hours, whether I was there to see it or not. Which was fortunate, because that was the night Thaddeus came home with papers that would change everything one final time. The papers Thaddeus brought home that night were divorce documents, but not the kind I expected. These weren't negotiations or settlements. They were declarations of war disguised as legal proceedings, designed to destroy me before I could destroy him. Fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, tax evasion. He read each charge like he was ordering wine, savoring the words on his tongue. "My lawyers have been very busy building a case against you. By tomorrow morning, these documents will be filed and federal agents will be knocking on your door." The beautiful thing about having nothing left to lose is that threats lose their power over you. I sat in our living room, surrounded by the luxury his family's money had bought, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "That's interesting timing," I said, checking my phone with deliberate calm. "Because in about 6 hours, every major newspaper in California is going to receive a very comprehensive file about Riverside development, along with documentation of 12 other projects, 3 suspicious deaths, and financial records showing exactly where the Kensington money goes when it wants to disappear." His confident smile faltered for just a moment. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I stood up, walked to his bar cart, and poured myself 2 fingers of his most expensive whiskey. It tasted like victory and ashes. Your mother's charity foundation? The one that's supposed to help disadvantaged children? Very creative way to launder money through fake programs that don't exist. The federal investigators are going to love that. You have no proof. I have everything, Thaddeus. Bank records, emails, photographs, recorded conversations. 3 years of marriage to a man who thought I was too stupid to understand what he was doing right in front of me. That's when he showed me his true face one final time. Not anger or fear, but something colder. The look of a man who had killed before and would kill again to protect what was his. You won't live long enough to see those files published, he said, reaching for his phone. One call, and you'll have an unfortunate accident just like all the others. Make the call, I said, and my voice was steady as bedrock. But before you do, check your mother's bank accounts. Check your father's business holdings. Check the Kensington family trust fund that you think makes you untouchable. Something in my tone made him pause, his finger hovering over his phone screen. For the first time that night, uncertainty flickered across his perfect features. What did you do? I did what you taught me to do, I said, setting down my glass with the delicate precision of a chess master making the final move. I played to win. Every illegal transaction your family has made in the last decade has been flowing through a shell company that doesn't actually exist. Every bribe, every payoff, every blood-soaked dollar has been moving through accounts that I control. The color drained from his face like wine from a broken glass. That's impossible. Is it? You forget that I'm very good at what I do, Thaddeus. While you were planning my destruction, I was planning yours. The fictional company that's been handling your family's dirty money for 3 years? I created it. I own it. And tomorrow morning, when the FBI comes knocking, they're going to find that every crime you've accused me of, you've actually been committing yourself. He lunged for me then, his mask finally slipping completely, revealing the monster underneath. But I was ready for that too. The small recorder in my pocket had captured everything, and the panic button Zara had given me was already pressed. The sound of sirens in the distance was the sweetest music I'd ever heard. The tragic thing, I said, watching him pace our living room like a caged predator, is that if you'd just been content with your legitimate empire, none of this would have happened. But greed is a poison, Thaddeus. And eventually, it kills everything it touches. 3 days later, I was sitting on the deck of my rebuilt coastal estate, watching the sunrise paint the Pacific in shades of gold and redemption. The news was full of the Kensington scandal, and Thaddeus was in federal custody awaiting trial on charges that would ensure he spent the rest of his life in a cage. But this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice, finally served. 6 months after the Kensington Empire collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane, I stood in the renovated community center in Riverside, watching children play in a playground that sat on soil that had been cleaned and made safe. The families who had been poisoned by Thaddeus's greed were finally getting the medical care they needed, funded by the restitution seized from Kensington Holdings. The coastal estate had been rebuilt, but not as the monument to excess it once was. Instead, it had become something more beautiful, a retreat center for women escaping domestic violence, a place where broken people could come to heal while watching the eternal patience of the ocean. I kept a small apartment in the renovated carriage house, simple and clean, with windows that faced the sunrise. The irony, Zara said, joining me on the deck with 2 cups of coffee that steamed like incense in the morning air, is that you ended up with more money than you started with. She was right. The legitimate assets seized from the Kensington family had been substantial, and my role in exposing their crimes had entitled me to significant whistleblower rewards. But money, I had learned, was just a tool. What mattered was how you used it. Any regrets? She asked. I thought about Thaddeus, now serving 25 to life in federal prison, his golden voice smile finally extinguished. I thought about Cordelia Kensington, stripped of her social position and facing her own criminal charges. I thought about all the people who had suffered under their family's cruelty, finally getting justice. Only one, I said. That it took me so long to fight back. A car pulled into the driveway below us, and I watched as a young woman stepped out, her face bearing the familiar marks of someone who had survived hell and was ready to begin healing. She would be staying with us for as long as she needed, in a room with ocean views and locks that only she controlled. This was my empire now. Not built on greed or corruption, but on something more powerful, the understanding that true strength comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. The final appeals in Thaddeus's case had been denied. Justice was complete. I deleted the message without replying and walked inside to welcome our new resident. The girl from Bakersfield was finally home, in a place she had built with her own hands, surrounded by people she had chosen to call family. The ocean outside sang its eternal song of patience and power, waves wearing away stone one drop at a time, reshaping the world through quiet persistence. I had learned to speak its language, and in return, it had taught me the most valuable lesson of all. Sometimes the only way to save yourself is to save everyone else first. And sometimes, the greatest victory is not in defeating your enemies, but in becoming someone they could never touch again. In the distance, I could hear children laughing in their safe playground, and the sound was more beautiful than any symphony ever written. This was what winning actually looked like.